My name is Christian Novak, a representative of the Military Education Preservation Project, and I am at the home of David Keene on this day, August 14th, 2020, talking to Mr. Keene about his time in the service. Mr. Keene, can you start by giving us some background information on yourself, starting with where you were born?
I was born in Claxton, Georgia, Evans County. My daddy was in the Navy at that time, stationed off the coast of Korea on an aircraft carrier, USS Oriskany.
What did your mom do?
Mom, she was a teacher. She taught in Glenwood, Georgia for 2 years until she had me, till they got married and had me, and she quit teaching then. And then she was a housewife until, let's see, probably, I'm trying to figure out how many years later, 30 years later or 20 years later, and she went back to Georgia Southwestern, redid her degree and started back teaching again, taught first grade, taught in Sly County, and then taught at Southland Academy first grade for 15 years before she retired.
How did you get involved in the service?
Won the draft lottery, I guess you'd say. I joined the service. I joined the Navy to try to keep from going to Vietnam, and wound up. I'd been to trade school and worked at a automotive dealership and then a farm implement dealership. And the the Navy recruiter came to where I worked and offered me a job as an E4 in the Seabees as a construction mechanic.
What is an E4?
That's it's a third class petty officer, so construction mechanic. So it's like the same thing as a corporal in the Marines or Army.
So what did you do? What was your specific job?
Well, in Vietnam, I was a lift truck mechanic. I had 27 lift trucks all over Vietnam. When I got there, they asked, who would, we need a lift truck mechanic, and who would be one? So I volunteered. I volunteered for the Navy to keep them going to Vietnam, and wound up in 10 of us went to Vietnam out of boot camp. And then I didn't learn. I volunteered to be a lift truck mechanic, and they didn't tell me where they were at. I had 27 lift trucks that different fire bases and supply bases all over South Vietnam area. So they gave me a weapons carrier, a toolbox, a M16 and a M79, and a map.
So after you got drafted, what happened after that? What was the first thing that happened after you got drafted?
Well, I was inducted at Fort McPherson out of Atlanta, and they flew us to Gulfport, Mississippi. That's where I was into what they called a directly procured petty officer program. I was in the last company of those. A guy met us at the airport in Gulfport, or it might have been Biloxi. I don't know where we flew into because that's been a long time ago. But he was sweet as honey. He bought some of them beers and all at the bar. I didn't drink, but he was like he was their best buddy. And so we got on the bus. As soon as we pulled through the gate, he did a 360-degree. Like if you watched any of these programs, what they do to you, like you weren't worth anything to him. Started talking real nice to you, like calling you all good kind of names and everything. They demoralize you mainly to get you accustomed to the military life. It was night when we got there, and so the next day they took us all to the barber, and they made you pay for a haircut, and they cut all your hair off. Mine wasn't too bad, but some of the guys, we had some hippies and all then that had hair down to the shoulders. They cried when they got theirs cut, but it was pretty good adventure. I forget what we did the first day besides getting our hair cut, and getting our uniforms. Yeah, they measured us, and you signed all your wills and what have you. Well, they didn't know who was going to Vietnam then, but they give you a uniform, and then you'd get up probably 4:30 in the morning, and we would march all over. Then the drill instructor, ours was a former. He was Air Force, was former Air Force, and he was a first class steel worker, Seabee. So that's a E6. So he was a pretty good guy. But they would come in like do an inspection during the middle of the night, and they would find somebody had left a rag out or a sock out or something like that, and they would wake everybody up banging trash cans and all, and you'd have to get dressed and fall out and march in the middle of the night. So, you know, they'd getting you demoralized. They did make everybody go to church, you know, to chapel, they called it, on Sunday, and things like that. That was good. Had pretty good meals. I showed Christian my shot record. I think I got 27 shots during my boot camp time period. They'd come out with the air guns then, and if you moved when they were giving you a shot, they'd rip your arm open. So some of the guys were passing out from the shots, or having reactions from the shots. And I remember they had a big, what they called a grinder, where we marched, and some of the guys didn't know the right from the left, so they would make them tote the rest of the day a concrete block in the right or the left, so they would remember which was the right and which was the left. So, and most of them, I was 19. Some of them were younger than me, and during that time period, I know there was one guy that wasn't but 18 that was in my group. He was from Meigs, Georgia. But most of them were my age or maybe a little bit older. So I went to Nashville Auto Diesel College, and several of those guys I saw them there too. So I knew some of the people that were there. But it was pretty fun. I was telling my grandkids the other day, they like to swim and all. When during the boot camp, we had a 30-foot diving board in the pool, and us being in the Navy, they would make us jump off that diving board in full uniform, and then you had to pull your pants off and tie the legs up and make you a life jacket out of your pants. So they showed you how to do that, but we never I don't know why they were making us do that, because we never were on a ship, so we didn't really need it. But we've had to go through that Navy part of it also. Let's see, we went out to, they called it Camp Shelby, to do our rifle range, and like summer camp, like the National Guard does their summer camp. We would camp out there and go crawl through the mud, and getting shot at under barbed wire and all, so just to get us ready any type of war type situations. They had a gas chamber we had to go through. CS grenade gas, and they would make you go in there. We had gas mask on and everything. They would make you go through the gas chamber, and then you'd have to pull your gas mask off, and they would ask you same questions Christian asked me. Where were you born? What's your address? Yada yada, everything. They would make you talk until you got a good dose of that tear gas, and you didn't. If you rubbed your eyes, you were in deep hurt. It would burn you real bad, and if you cried, the water would make it burn worse too. So we had to go through that, and then when we got through with that, we were marching, and then they threw CS grenades at us, so we had to don our gas mask and everything on that. Also, we went through chemical warfare training, and they taught us how to give ourselves a antidote shot. And one thing I'll never forget, we had a chief. He had shorts on, and had guys lined up in rows and chairs, and so he popped a needle in his thigh, and he didn't know it, but he hit a artery. And when he pulled it out, everybody on the front row got sprayed with blood, and some of them guys were passing out. But that was, one of the funny things about it. But we had that in our, pack and all when we went to Vietnam and everything, in case we got mustard gas or something like that. It was an antidote for that. Trying to remember what else we went through in boot camp. I don't know, it lasted, 8 weeks, I believe, what my boot camp was, and that was at Gulfport. And after that, I got sent to, there was 10 of us out of my company, out of the last two companies, 186, 187, that were selected to go to Vietnam, and they sent us to Camp Pendleton, the Marine base in California, for tactical military training, they called it, I think. And so we had to go through the Marine weapons training and all. So I told them I joined the Navy. I didn't join the Marines, but I got to see what Ventura, got to ride down the Ventura Highway, if you heard that song, and got to see Malibu Beach. Got to see some things. I'm from Ideal, Georgia, and it was 600 and some odd people, and you don't see stuff like you see in California. So I got to see some things a preacher's son don't see. So oh me. But it was spent there 4 weeks there. Then we were being sent to Vietnam. They bused us to Los Angeles International Airport, and I was telling Christian we got on I think it was a United Airlines flight to go to McChord Air Force Base in Seattle, and so I was 19 then, and most of the guys were about the same age. Flew off, and one of the landing gear hung halfway up, wouldn't go up or down, so they flew around trying to get it to open. It wouldn't go down, so went out over the Pacific and dumped all the fuel. And we flew in like all us young kids, and they had the runway foamed, and you could see fire trucks and ambulances and all, and just before we touched down, they got the landing gear down, so that was pretty good. And then we went to change planes, and they flew us into McChord Air Force Base, and I got there, and it was fenced in. They had all these armed guards. I was wondering what was going on, but it was people protesting us going to Vietnam. So that was a sort of an eye-opener. Didn't realize it at the time, but people.
Was that the first time you'd seen a protest in person?
That was the first time, because in around the Seabee base, they were used to Seabees, and that looks like Warner Robins here that supported the community. They got probably millions of dollars from the people living off base and buying stuff and buying cars and what have you. It's a pretty big base in Fort Hueneme, and so it was a real big base, and in the Marine base there also. So they got money from them, so they didn't protest us. We didn't see much there, because I know I went out to one of the local churches. Some of us young ones went out to some churches while we were there, and it was good. You could get in trouble if you wanted to, but I pretty well stayed around base except for going to church.
How did you feel, because knowing you were going to Vietnam and seeing the protests, how did that make you feel?
It didn't bother me that much, really, because I was going to go. Like the preacher at that church we went to, they were saying, just pray and God will keep you from going. But I felt he wanted me to go there for some reason, so I wasn't scared really. I was not really scared, but you get worried a little bit. But it wasn't as bad as you would think. Some people were scared. Like we had one guy, when we got over there, he would sleep with his weapon across his chest with his uniform on, all he was scared. But we flew from McCord, spent 3 days in McCord Air Force Base, and flew, refueled in Anchorage, Alaska. I don't know what order, but we stopped in Guam and the Philippines and Tokyo, Japan. And then I flew into Cam Ranh Bay, and like I was telling Christian, the plane ahead of us got shot down, and it was about 2:30 in the morning time we got to land, and it was real humid, 100% humidity. The smells, you remember the smells. It's awful smell, and the heat. Of course, from Georgia, I was used to the heat and the humidity, but not the smells, different smells. And then we were picked up by a deuce and a half, loaded on the Seabees, and ran out probably 20-30 miles from Cam Ranh into the Seabee base. Got there about 2:30 a.m. and they assigned us a barracks to go to and all. And then I was a mechanic there, and that's when I told Christian they asked for a volunteer to be they wanted somebody to be a lift truck mechanic, so I said I'll do it. And that's when I found out where the lift trucks were at the fire bases and the supply bases and all. But like I was at Cam Ranh, they kept your weapons. You had to go check them out. I've still got my cards that you gave them with the serial numbers of the weapons, and they kept them locked, and so you had to check them out if something happened. And the first time I had guard duty, you were by yourself basically. Other people at other bunkers or what have you, but one night I was on guard duty, and I said, man, that's a heck of a lightning storm they're having over on that mountain next to us. And come to find out, it was a battleship was trying to turn that mountain into sand to get rid of the Viet Cong. So that was a learning experience. The beaches there were beautiful. They had a marine iguana that lived in the ocean. That's they were pretty. Got to see some French machine gun bunkers and military stuff the French left when they left, and got to see some of the Vietnamese. We had Vietnamese on our base, Vietnamese Army on our base also, and went to. I was telling Christian they had a place called Tiger Lake, sort of like a little R&R spot, and we went there had the bands there, and some of the Vietnamese caught a Komodo dragon, about a 6-foot long Komodo dragon, and skinned it, and they cooked it and ate it. So while we were there, that was fairly a different experience. I've never eaten a lizard before, but it would have been good, I think. But that Tiger Lake was pretty good. Let's see what else. Like I said, we had a open air theater on the base, and the Vietnamese loved to see John Wayne movies, so that was good, funny watching them, how they reacted to John Wayne. He was their hero, so I don't know if they could understand what he was saying, but they loved it. And then I was in Cam Ranh a couple of months, and we give that base to the Vietnamese. And
when was this? When did you get to Cam Ranh?
It was in March of '71. I don't know the exact day when it was. 1971 March.
And then when did y'all leave?
My thing says I was in Benoit from April '71 to January, but we were there a couple of months anyway. It seemed longer than that, but it was. The beaches were beautiful white sand. The water was crystal clear in the ocean, South China Sea, like they call China Beach, on the show China Beach. It was beautiful. But we were giving our equipment to the Vietnamese, but they didn't want it. They wanted new equipment. So we dug holes and drove jeeps and deuce and a halves and buses and all kind of equipment, and then covered it under about 30 foot of dirt. So that was, a wasteful to me. And then we all loaded on a C-130, no seats in it, just the straps. We had our M16. I had an M16, M79 in my sea bag, and we took off, and the back door popped open, so we had to land and get it shut. And then a little while later, they blew an engine, so we stopped on an abandoned airstrip, and we had to get out and guard the plane while they rebuilt the engine on the airplane. So that's, besides people trying to shoot at you, we were the plane wasn't very good quality. So I don't know, I reckon it was an Air Force plane. I guess it may have been a Navy plane. I don't know. I don't remember. But I remember us guarding the plane while they were rebuilding it, and it's a good thing they had the parts, I guess. They were used to it. Then we flew into Benoit. They called it Rocket Alley because our base was right on the end of the airstrip. There was a Air Force base. We were on the very tip of the approach to the runway, and the Army base was behind us. I don't know why they had us on the perimeter, because we're supposed to be a defensive and not a offensive battalion, and but we were there on the edge, and the Army was behind us, and the Air Force, like I was telling Christian, the Air Force had air conditioning, and we lived in like chicken houses. We did have beds. The Army had cots, and the Air Force had air conditioning barracks. So, oh me! But I reckon I should have joined the Air Force, I guess. I don't know. But I was the mechanic there. Also, I was fire captain at least once a month. We rotated that out. So, but I would be. We had 30-foot watchtowers there. The ones in Cam Ranh were short, right on the ground. The ones in Benoit looked out over the jungle, and they were 30 foot high, had sandbags, and then 2-foot armor plate around the sandbags. Also had Conex boxes, storage containers buried into we had about 10-12 foot bank of dirt around it, but had a slit cut out of them, and had a M60 machine gun in those. I was bunker captain several times too, always during the night. I don't know if I ever had it during the daytime or not, but I was telling Christian, on my wife's birthday is December the 13th. That night, the eve going into her birthday, I was tower captain. And then Christmas Eve night, I thought Bob Hope came to the base, but I was tower captain that night. So I spent the whole Christmas Eve night in the tower. Let's see what else we had. I had a Super 8 camera, and I've recorded mongooses chasing snakes, killing snakes, and chasing rats, and so was pretty neat. We would get to watch the Cobra helicopters at night. That was beautiful. Them working out at night, shooting them mini guns and all, makes you proud that they were on your side. So I was telling him we got a new commanding officer one time. They sent him to us because he couldn't go up to captain, or the same as a colonel for anybody else, like the Army or Air Force or Marines. A captain in the Navy is the same as a colonel, and he couldn't get promoted without serving in a hazardous duty station. So they sent him to Vietnam with us, and he wanted us to go through 7:30 every morning, fall out for dress inspection, spit sign shoes, and starched. We wore greens like the Marines did, but we had to have them starched and pleated and all, be real clean and snazzy. So did that for about 3 weeks, and after we did it for 3 weeks in a row, heard boom, boom. They started hearing mortars coming. The Viet Cong had been watching him, or watching us, and I was telling Christian I had 2 fall on each side of me, but both of them were duds. But I didn't say this to him, but I'll never forget that CO in his fancy uniform. It rained all the time, and I will never forget him going spread eagled into a mud puddle when the mortar started hitting. So, and we were laughing at, getting hit with mortars, but we were laughing, because we were laughing at him. Wasn't worried about the mortars because we were used to it, but he had never seen them before. But that was an experience. I don't know whether it was December, President Nixon signed a peace treaty, and me and 7 other men were assigned to go around all over Vietnam and pick up all the Navy's equipment. And we had 4 trucks, 2 people per truck. I rode shotgun on one of the trucks, but they'd let us go 20 minutes apart. They wouldn't let us go together. They didn't want us all to get wiped out at one time.
What does riding shotgun mean in terms of being in Vietnam?
Well, I had locked and loaded with the M16 and the M79 and watching for whoever or whatever, and that was an adventure, because we did get shot at several times during that adventure. Let's see, we'll drop back before that time. We had tower captain and bunker captain, and then sometimes they would put me, we would have to do guard duty with the Army, and I'm not sure if Air Force was with us or not then, because they weren't too strict on them, but we would have, in case we got overrun, we would be the last defense. And so I was in there, and these guys come in. They had a gallon Ziploc bag of heroin, and they had another gallon Ziploc bag of marijuana, and said, "You want some of this?" I didn't smoke or drink, so I didn't. But the next morning, both of those bags were empty, so it wouldn't have mattered if we had got hit or not. They wouldn't have cared. But I just remembered that, so I let you know about that, because drugs, like I was telling Christian, we get American cigarettes, like a carton of American cigarettes. I could get a kilo of heroin for a carton of American cigarettes on the black market over there. That's why some drugs was so bad when we got back to the States, because you could get drugs real plentiful over there, and it was strong stuff, and a lot of people got hooked over there while we were there. A lot of people had to stay, in rehab or whatever before they'd let them come home because of that. But I was my order said I would be on that detail for 3 months, just going around picking up the equipment, and some reason we did it quick and got it done in about a month. And then we were loaded onto a LST, all the equipment, a landing craft like a Navy ship, in the port of Vung Tau, and was a R&R spot in Vietnam. I was on the weekend. I went to the beach, and I had a full beard. Navy, they would let us grow beards and all, laying on the beach, and you could get chilled pineapples. That was good stuff over there, fresh grown pineapples. And I was laying on the beach one day, and a guy come up to me. I didn't look nothing like normal. He said, "You David Keene, aren't you?" And there was a guy when I lived in Macon, Georgia, my daddy was a preacher, and we got moved to Ideal. Probably I was in the, let's see, 8th grade, and I'd had a guy that lived up the street from me. His daddy was a Army, a lifer. He was in the Army, and they had moved to Michigan. Probably, let's see, I was in 8th grade. Probably in the 5th or 6th grade, he was a year younger than me. They moved to Michigan, and I hadn't never seen him before. He was in the Army, and we ran into each other on the beach. And then he gave me his address, but I never could get back a hold to him after we got out. So, but his daddy, they had moved back to it. His daddy was a captain on the police force in Atlanta then, so they had moved back to Georgia. But that was how small the world is. You 12,000 miles away from home and run into somebody that used to be your next door neighbor. So that was an adventure. Well, we went to Tonsonute after that and turned in our weapons and everything, and you had to go through drug tests and and out of that group, there was 8 of us. I was the only one that got to go home. The other 7 had contracted different venereal diseases during our when we were getting all the equipment up, and I was the only one that didn't. I got to go home on time. So, but then I was transferred to back to Gulfport, Mississippi, to MCB 133. I was in CBMU 302 in Vietnam, and it decommissioned, and they split us all up. I think it's come back now because I found them on Facebook, and they've recommissioned to CBMU 302. But I was sent to NMCB 133, and I spent about 8 months in Gulfport, Mississippi. I was on the shore patrol for a month or 2, but I got married when I got back from Vietnam also. And so my wife and me, first month or so, I'd just go in for roll call, and they'd send me home because they couldn't send me anywhere because I'd been to a hazardous duty station. And so we had a government paid honeymoon, I guess you'd say. We'd go to the beach, go fishing every day, and learned which fish were the best ones to cook. But then I got put on shore patrol for a little while, and then I was assigned with the Marines in the Armory. I had a gunnery sergeant I worked for. He said I got 2,000 M16s, 1,000 M14s, several hundred .45 pistols, and let's see, 20-something M16s and 3 50 caliber machine guns. He had me disassemble all of them and clean them and put them back together, and then he put me in charge of inspecting, like they had summer camp guys come in, put me in charge of inspecting the weapons for them. And he said, now, I don't care what their rank is, you're in charge. So whatever, and he had showed me places I could let you clean a gun, and I could find some carbon in it. I knew places that they didn't know, and that was pretty fun, getting some of the officers, making them go back and clean the weapons a bunch of times. So, but I wasn't too bad, not over once or twice, But I stayed there for 8 months, and talking about this man, I went to last year. I was at Sam's in Macon, Georgia, and there was a man come up. He had a World War II, Korea, and Vietnam cap on. He was a Marine. He was a master gunnery sergeant, and got to talking to him and found out he trained my gunnery sergeant that I worked with when he first joined. And I told him that that guy had retired just right after I left Gulfport. He retired, so it was good to see him. Then I saw him again about 6 months later, and he was in a wheelchair, and he's probably dead now because the World War II vet, there's not many of those left now. But it was fun, small world again, meeting somebody that trained the guy you worked for. So that was pretty good. And then just let's see, what was it? September '72. I got we were getting orders, got orders to go to Rota, Spain. So my wife moved back to Georgia. They sent us to Camp Lejeune, the Marine base, to have special military training, they call, before we went to Europe. And so then I moved back into the base, and then they sent us to Rota, Spain, where I got sent to. They called it Silver City. We lived in Quonset huts. The base had been empty for several years, and we was the first ones to get back, in it. But it called it the Silver City because all of them were painted silver. And I was a mechanic there. Also, on the weekends we would tour, go to different cities in Spain and visit cathedrals, what have you. And I was telling Christian I was the only one that didn't drink, so I got nominated to drive the bus. So got to drive the bus, got to go see we got to go to a bullfight, got to go see running of the bulls, got to go see cathedrals all over the place, got to visit wineries. I even got my name put on a barrel of wine. I know that's probably gone now because that was in '72, '73. I left there in June of '73, mustered out at Albany Naval Air Station. It's gone too now. And July the 9th, 1973 is when I mustered out. But when I was in Spain, I got to go to Africa. Spent 3 days in Africa. Got to go to Italy, Venice, Italy. Flew in a radar plane across the Mediterranean. I wish I could have found my Super 8 of them, and took pictures of ships, going down the Mediterranean when I went to Venice, and stayed there 3 or 4 days. I don't remember. Let's see what I drove. Had like the guard duty I had there. I would be like taxi service. I would drive a bus. We had the Naval Air Station, had the Seabee base, had a submarine base, so I would run service through all 3 bases, up to a certain hour of the night for people to go get to clubs or what have you, going from base to base. And did that for about 3 months. Till several hours, I don't know. And we had a chaplain they called Chapel in the Pines, and the chaplain, his last name was Stott, and I would help him on weekends. We helped one weekend. We helped a bunch of monks. They had a monastery out of Rota, and they were doing some work. So I checked out a dump truck for the chaplain and drove it, and whatever they were tearing out, went and dumped it for them, and got a steak supper at the enlisted men's club, NCO club, and the bouncer was from Georgia, so that was pretty good. And let's see, trying to think of what else we did in Spain. But it was pretty good experience. We were there during Christmas, and like the Feliz Navidad, the song, they had that written all over everything. What else did we do? But we built wells for the civilian population in Spain. So like in Vietnam, we built roads, we built military housing for the military dependents, built runways, stuff like that. But we mainly drilled wells for the civilians in Spain. One time somebody in Spain gave the chaplain an organ. One of the guys had his wife over there, and she played the organ. So that organ was on the 8th floor of a hotel, an apartment building, and it wouldn't fit on the elevator. So I remember us having to tote that. I think I was 21 then, so I was a lot younger, and toting that down the stairs and then putting it on, loading it on the truck. And then there was some like American tourists saw us and blowing the horn and waving at us. I remember that. But the Spanish people didn't care much for us. I don't know why, but I would say it was worse than Vietnam. Except you got to tote your weapon in Vietnam, and Spain you had it, but it was locked up. Also, we had a nuclear submarine in the submarine base, and that was when the Arabs and all were having an uprising. I hadn't said anything about this, but one night there was a substation, electric substation, in between us and the submarine base, and the something happened. The transformer started blowing up, and everybody thought was that we were being attacked, because a lot of us had just come back from Vietnam, so we were still gun shy. So, but it was just electrical problems. So, and I was also telling Christian we did a mount out while we were in Spain, where you had to load up everything in 36 hours and move the base and then set it back up somewhere else. We did one of those when we were in Spain. So always trying to keep you on your toes. And then I'd been over there. Like I said, I was in on the directly procured petty officer program, and they've put me in to give me the same time as like if I had got drafted. And I was supposed to serve 30 months. I thought it was 3 years, but I was over in Spain, and they told me, said, it's time for you to go. So they sent me. I said, where you want to check out at? And I said, well, Albany was the closest to me. I think it was 70 miles from here. And so I was assigned to Naval Air Station in Albany, and I stayed there for a week before I mustered out. And then, well, when they told me to meet the yeoman after I'd been there 7 days, and I got there and said, I could have checked you out the first day, because I still had some vacation I could have used, but that was all right. Drove back and forth every day, and I was out. I went back to working at the automotive dealership. So.
What was the first thing you remember when you came back home?
Well, I know when I come back from Vietnam, every time a car would backfire, you'd hit the ground, because you were used to being shot at, so you would hit the ground. And one thing I didn't say, I went on R&R from when I was in Vietnam, and they said, do not wear your uniform, wear your civilian clothes, and because of the protesters. And then also when we came back to California, they said, don't wear your uniform, so people are strange, you see. But I was glad to be back home. And we lived my wife had rented a one room apartment up the street from where her mom and daddy live in Oglethorpe, and we lived there for several months. So that was all right, I don't remember how long we lived there, but then we moved to rented a 2-bedroom house, and then I bought a house in Ideal, so from an army veteran that had graduated with me. So.
Did you fly into San Francisco on the way back from Vietnam?
Mm-hmm.
Did you encounter any protests there? Or?
Most of them were pretty nice. We rented a car. I'll tell you, there was 4 of us rented a car and drove all the way back to Port Hueneme. And Don McLean, American Pie song had just came out. And we knew it by heart by the time we got to the base. But that was, we didn't, California, near the base, they they were pretty calm with us. Didn't run into any problems then. So, and then of course when I flew into Atlanta, both when I was on leave after I got out of Vietnam, I didn't have any problems. Of course, I didn't have my uniform on, so that was. But mainly, that in Washington State, the most I saw. So, and I didn't realize what was going on till why we. I thought they was trying to keep us from trying to get away. So. Learned what they were doing, so protecting us, not.
Did you have any memorable experiences in combat? I mean, because you were defensive, right?
Yeah, we did.
All the combat you saw was
mortars and rockets, right? and running over mines and with vehicles. So we lost, I think, 13 men from running over anti-tank mines. So we would weld 2-inch plate in the floorboards of the trucks, but it would still blow you through the top roof. So didn't do any good. So it was before these armored vehicles and all. So, but mainly we were just defensive, as they say. They wouldn't. When I was there, they wouldn't let you. You had to call in and ask permission to fire back. And they say no, they might. One time we had a bunch of, you could see tracers coming all at you, call in. I was in the 30-foot tower, call in. No, there's an Army Ranger group out there, you might hit them, so they wouldn't let us shoot. Another thing, we had we had people that walked around with 870 Remington pump shotguns and inside the base, guarding. And there was one guy, he sort of bullied one of the lower class enlisted men, and we had a mortar attack one night, and I heard something go boom boom. He had hemmed that guy up and shot at him a couple of times, and he didn't bother him no more. So that was there was a lot of stuff that they say friendly fire went on. You didn't mess with people, you didn't bully, because they'd get you. So I do, like I told you, I didn't drink while I was over there or anything. And one night we lived in huts, and there was usually 4 people per room. And one night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody knocked on the door. One of the first class petty officers told me, "You need to go get Han before he gets arrested or gets killed." He'd got drunk and somebody beat him almost to death, and I had to go. I went and got him to keep him out. He said he's fixing to get killed or get put in the brig, sent to Long Bend prison I was telling you about. And one thing I didn't tell you about, I worked on lift trucks, and one day I was taking the mast apart on one, had it blocked up, I thought pretty good, and it was a 3-stage. I thought it was just a 2-stage, and one part of it fell down and it caught my hand, and I had an 1.5 inch and a quarter wrench, and it slung it. I never did find that wrench, but it caught my hand and crushed my left hand. So I went to the medics, and they put a air splint on my arm and hand. Didn't give me they didn't even give me an aspirin. Off we go to Long Bend. It's about 20-30 miles from where we were. They had a hospital there, and going through driving in the back of a military ambulance, no bed in it, just sitting on a bench or laying on a bench and bouncing all over, hitting those mortar holes. And got to that military hospital and seeing all those guys in there that they had, had open bay, and seeing how bad they were, and me just with a broke hand, but how lucky we were, I was. but they never did give me no pain medicine. Wrapped it, put some gauze in the middle of my hand and wrapped it up, and it bothered me for several years. Every once it started back now, but it had quit hurting. But it's now I can tell when the weather changes. But
what was the toughest thing you ever had to do while you were in the military?
Toughest thing, I was young then, so it didn't. The worst thing probably would be going to those lift trucks where the lift trucks were, because you had to check them, because they would booby trap them. They would hook up wires to the drive shaft, so if you crunk them up, and then it'd wrap the wire up and pull a pin out of a grenade, and had it in the fuel tank. So you had to be on guard every time. And like when we were driving, little kids would come up and they would drop a grenade in your fuel tank, little 6-year-old youngins or whatever. So, and that was bad, seeing the kids, that little, doing stuff like that. So did get to ride in a rickshaw when I was stationed at Thompson Newt in Saigon. So that was an experience. That wasn't tough, but when I was in that, on them 4 weeks of moving all the equipment, I think it was out of Vung Tau, I'm not sure, but a bunch of us went out to the village at night, and a guy had a 35-foot long boa constrictor, anaconda, or something like that, and they could give us $5, we'd take your picture with him. I wasn't going to let him wrap that around me. But did see, I got to see tigers when I was on watch, night watch, and saw a gorilla. I don't know what you'd say would be the toughest thing. Growing up, you grew up quick. 'Cause like I said, I was 19 and you were 30 or 40 when you left. So, and experience-wise, or emotion-wise. But the toughest thing I saw probably was seeing those guys in that hospital. So, and then in the prison too, and they had that Long Bend prison. And the one thing I didn't tell you, when I was in Spain, I was going through the barracks and I come up on a guy that had slit his wrists, so and getting him to the hospital and all. And then that guy, when he got out, he did send me a letter thanking me, but that he was trying to commit. I don't know whether he was trying to commit suicide or just trying to get out, But he'd slit both his wrists, and that was pretty tough. So.
How'd you cope with being away from your family?
Well, my wife and me, we wrote each other every day, and you had the number. If they didn't come, like she'd send it today, it might not come to me in that order, so we would number them. She still got every letter I wrote, and I think I've got every one she wrote, but we wrote every day. So, and you didn't, like. I had a nephew that was in Afghanistan, and I could talk to him, through the computer and all. I never got to call. We would write, and we would do a little cassette, recording to each other when I was in Vietnam. And when I was in Spain, I could call every Sunday. They would let me call, and I could talk. I don't know. It was $18 and $20 for 3 minutes. I'd call her on Sunday. I'd call her. Let's see. I'd call her after lunch in Spain, and it was, I think, 7:30 their time or something like that. On Sunday, I'd call her every Sunday. Or, Lord, if nothing was going on. So. And another thing I didn't tell you, when I was in Spain, a bunch of the people, the regular Navy guys on the Naval Air Station. They had some of the cars there, and we would close the airstrip down and drag race on Sundays also. So that was pretty good. And I did get to see the Blue Angels when I was in Rhoda. That's the only time I ever got to see them perform. So and I don't know what else went on there. I bought a 30-06 Remington pump rifle over there, and I had to hand carry it. You wouldn't ever get to, when I flew back. None of the baggage people would touch it. I had it in a box with a lock, wooden box with a lock on it, and it's registered with the FBI, so federal. So I can't do nothing with that gun, because they can trace it, but they wouldn't touch it. I had to hand carry that gun. Every, place I transferred. To say I flew into Madrid and then flew into. There's two airports in New York. I flew into one of them, and then they transferred me to the other one and flew out of it and flew into Atlanta. But I had to carry that 30-06. You wouldn't do that now. So, of course, I didn't have no ammo or anything. So.
Well, you got any more interesting stories?
Bought it through the exchange at the gun club in Rhoda, Spain. They had a gun club at the base. Let's see, what else funny happened or interesting? Or like I told you, we did get to go to a Seabee ball in Biloxi. One of the worst things that happened when I come back from Vietnam, my wisdom teeth were impacted, and the Navy didn't have any dentists. They had the Air Force Base. They sent me to Keesler Air Force Base. So I was awake. They just numbed it and used a hammer and a chisel and busted those teeth out. So, and then I forget, my whole face was black, blue, purple. And then I don't know who's going to hear this. The guy's probably dead, but when I was on shore patrol, we ran radar, and there was a GTO come flying down, so I pulled him over and wrote him a ticket and all, and then when I went to the dentist, looking on the wall, he was the commanding officer of Keesler Air Force Base. He had a 69 GTO. So I wrote him a ticket. They probably threw it out, but that was interesting. So he didn't, usually the colonels think they're God, but he was all right. So he didn't fuss or nothing, because I reckon he knew he'd get it kicked. Oh me. But that's about, cause the worst thing I did on shore patrol, I reckon, mainly it was domestic disputes with, in the families and all. So, but that one, and guard duty, or at the theater, do what you call it, where you walk around keeping people from getting drunk at the theater, whatever.
All right, you got anything else?
I can't think of. I'll probably think of something when you cut it off, but right now, I don't know of anything. I know it was an adventure, as they say. I probably would do it again if I had to. An experience. You grow up quick. Meet a lot of friends. Lose a lot of friends. Like now, every day a different one dies from the effects of Agent Orange. So I get word that they've died or what have you. So went to the cemetery over here a couple of weeks ago, and there were 4 Vietnam veterans that I knew that died from Agent Orange. So, out of just one cemetery, and we got 2, 3, 7, I think, around here. So there ain't no telling how many, but every day is a different one dying from the Agent Orange. So, and how blessed we are. So.
All right. Well, on behalf of the Military Education Preservation Project, thank you for your service, first of all. And thank you for your time and your willingness to share your experiences with us.
And thank you for doing this.